This is one of the 1907 studies described as a medical student, a male figure wearing a jacket. This study is a clue. What it indicates is that there's an association between the finished picture and what is suggested in this area here. It's much more likely that this is a self-portrait, that these are sheets of drawings, and this is a shape of a fish. And there are other studies which indicate much the same thing. Picasso very often would obliterate the face of his own portraiture, particularly in his crucifixions, where he's the crucified personality. He is a fascinating character, and the more you delve into what he's up to, the more mysterious it all becomes. The first layer of Les Demoiselles that we're going to talk about concerns this. Here I've selected part of the image and put a light green mask around it. Here we have the tail of the fish, the lower part of the fish coming down here, the belly and the head, the eye and the back. So that's very clearly a fish. Beside it, we have another concealed fish here. Features the head of the first transforms into the tail of the second fish. What this reminds me of is the astrological symbol for Pisces. It's almost identical, two fish in close proximity swimming in opposite directions. Picasso was involved quite deeply with occult things, the zodiac, the age of Pisces. It wouldn't be unusual for him to make some kind of reference to this. While I'm not saying I know that that's what he's doing, I'm just suggesting a possible reason for this being present. Superficially, what you're looking at is a detail of the knee and the leg of the central figure in the painting. It's highly suggestive of an erect phallus. On another level, it's a fish with a suggestion of a tail in another color down here. I'd like to mention this vertical black line here. Picasso very often, in his use of concealed imagery, would leave little indicators and markers, little helpful pointers to say, okay, tail goes to here. There are lots of different types of indicators. It's again clearly a fish hidden in the background. Very similar coloration going on between the head and the tail and the dorsal fin. Note the very similar color between the tail and the top part of the body. Sometimes the concealed images can be seen more clearly when the picture is on its side. Sometimes they can be seen the right way up. He's an expert at concealment, and he will create distraction. And the combination of these parts of the drapery and this part here form a flying fish. Picasso very often puts the eyes in as a sort of confirmation. He gives us not only clues, but he gives us confirmation that there's an intentional image underlying the superficial presentation. An extraordinary way of concealing something. We have the dorsal fin here, the mouth, the front part of the head, obviously fish of the same variety. Note the big eye in the middle. This is something which Picasso was to repeat much later on in his life. He numerous times refers back to Les Demoiselles in his ceramic art reminiscences, one might say. He seems to be repeating himself and going back over old ground, but not in a way that is identical. It's always fresh, it's always in a new form, but the essential nature of the symbolism is repetitive. There's a sort of erotic aspect to this. The tail, the body of the fish. When you go in very close, there's suggestions of eyes and gills. Very Picasso. There is Again, the very subtle suggestion of an eye here and a gill here and maybe a fin. A lot of it is open to interpretation. He leaves a variation in possibilities, particularly with the aquatic imagery. There can be two possibilities for tails. There can be one body of a fish hidden inside another. They can share the same body parts and so on. So the same tail relates to this and can also relate to this form here. So it could be a small fish or a long fish. Also, this one has a bit of a suggested eye here, a rather elongated one, or even a pinpointed one there in the front. This could be a fin. He does continually leave little confirmatory indications. It's clearly got the form of a fish slapped over her shoulder, big block-headed kind of fish here, and the suggestion of a dorsal fin, which could also be another fish partially obscured by the head of this larger impression of a fish. If you look very closely, the head has two little eyes on it and what appears to be an open mouth. This is a common feature with some of the other fish that we're going to be looking at. They very frequently have open mouths. What Picasso has done here has employed a different area of coloration to suggest the spiny dorsal fin and the tail in the fingers and thumb. It's a type of image that I've seen him use on a number of occasions. The forearm fish, very clearly a fish in the face of a figure that appears to be peering in through a curtain. I'm quite surprised that this has gone unnoticed for so very long by the professionals. Picasso actually plays on this. When we look at the studies and the subsequent sketches that are related to some of this material, we'll see an image of a woman who has a fish being grilled that has been placed directly over her eyes. That there is this play on eyes and fish. As if you go in very close to a clear reproduction, you'll see these lines in the painting. They are intentional. He's even put in this sort of trailing whisker that very strong suggestion of a fish concealed in the face of this character. The neck is a bit of a giveaway. The tail is segmented, as one sometimes sees. We've got the lower fin suggested by the form of the ear, the dorsal fin suggested by the nose, a large turtle, the front end, wide open mouth, very large eye, the sort of suggestion of a scaly body, and perhaps even here the hump of the shell. Even has the suggestion of a flipper on the end of the leg there. When you look at the tonal variance between this green part inside this triangular shape here and what surrounds it, you can see that there are intentional markers left indicating that this was an intentional image. Similarly, and as we've seen previously, there is a very faint suggestion of an eye, pupil here, yet another turtle formed from part of the drapery that one of the women is holding, and the negative space between her legs. We've got the head here with the eye, the shell, and then the legs represented by this lower form here. If you analyze some of the more important works in the way that I'm trying to demonstrate here, and you digest what it is you're looking at, you will see that there's a visual genius at work par excellence, that nobody comes anywhere close to what Picasso is capable of. Les Demoiselles is one of the most outstanding examples of his genius. Pablo Picasso has always got tricks up his sleeve. He will try to pull the wool over your eyes with the immediate appearance. You're really only looking, with the more important work, you're really only looking at the wrapper. And what I think we're looking at here is the head of a shark coming out of the waves. And here's the pupil of the eye, sticking out, observing intently what's going on ahead of it. It takes a few seconds to get used to it, but just look at the image there. And right, what we're dealing with, as with the superficial aspect of Les Demoiselles, is a very cartoon like painting. It looks like a cartoon. These look like cartoon characters. Picasso was extremely advanced in his approach, and so what we could be looking at is a 1960s cartoon. Now, it could also be that this dark area here is the eye. Picasso leaves certain things open. He gives you possibilities. He plays with the image. He allows... what we're looking at here is a sort of jellyfish. It could be said that it was my own creation, but I don't really think so. So I'm going to throw this open. It seems odd to me that that such an image could be developed without doing anything other than creating a sort of colour surround. I know for a fact that Picasso really enjoyed going to aquariums. He grew up and lived in a Mediterranean seaport. He liked to frequent fish markets. So there is a form there that could be interpreted as a jellyfish. There are very subtle suggestions that the cap of the fish, jellyfish, may have been intentional. There are certainly tonal variances. It wouldn't be beyond Picasso to hide such a thing. With such extraordinary powers of observation, he's perfectly capable of doing such a thing. We are in an aquarium. In other words, the entire picture is an underwater painting. So every element of it will have some degree of reference to the theme that he's hiding from us. So what we're looking at is the body of the fish here, I believe. It's a sort of triangular bodily structure. What makes me think that this is some kind of underwater creature is this area here. It's like a sickle-shaped tail. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's some kind of fish which he's seen in his visits to zoos and aquariums. There may well be something along these lines. And we have the eye, the open mouth, the tail, the dorsal fin, and the one of the lower fins. And he's even put little spines in there that might suggest they're related to that. We have a big tail kind of thing you might see in somebody's aquarium. Could be something along those lines. If you look closely, you'll see another eye. So again, we have these possibilities of different eyes. A wide open mouth up here, an eye here, the head coming down, pointed tail, and the suggestion of a little paw or foot or something. Certain ceramics which show that he's sort of reminiscing of some of the hidden imagery in Les Demoiselles in the decoration on these ceramics. Although they're not identical, they're very similar in some ways. We have the head sort of lurking in what appears to be drapery, with perhaps an eye area here, suggestion of a gill. So be here, it's hard to say. Dorsal fin, and then the body coming down to a sort of point. The continuity is interrupted by this triangular shape coming in here. But what's interesting, and this is again another indication of Picasso's use of markers and delineation points, is that directly below the point we have a fish tail marked out in a separate color. We've got a reference point in this shape here where it changes direction. This line changes direction exactly there. And so that's the intersection point. It's taken from the black line, it goes through the intersection point, comes to here, and then it sort of folds back on itself and forms this fin. Below it, we have this big, wide open mouth, shark-like presentation of a fish with perhaps two eyes here, or it could be one. It's not clear. Two fins, which are more or less symmetrical here. A dorsal fin. The back goes down where it forms a tail, which again could be, it could employ this white area. It might just be the pink area, but it's certainly suggested an aquatic creature of some type. I wouldn't even begin to guess what species this is, but it's definitely got the form of some submarine creature with a pointed head resting upon the head of the figure here. A scissor type jaw with a little eye here, moving in to bite upon this piece of fruit, which is already within its jaws. One of the most subliminal of the fish forms in Les Demoiselles. I could imagine people saying, but that's not there, I can't see that. I need to point out there are clear markers which outline this shape here. Similarly, the breast lines here do the same. So just going from one marker to the next and selecting it gives us this shape. So what you've got here is a rather poetic association of imagery, typical of Picasso. All the symbolic associations, when put together, leave one in awe. Picasso was way ahead of people like Matisse and other people that he may be compared with, way ahead in his use of poetic imagery. You can't compare, apart from in formalistic terms, you can't compare the work of Matisse with Picasso. It's stupid. It's like comparing a bicycle with a racehorse. Picasso is far and away the superior visual intelligence. And this hand slapped right onto it. Now, there are some ceramic plates by Picasso where you get precisely this symbolism produced much, much later. He's repeating precisely what you see here. So we have this massive, rather fierce-looking fish with a wide open mouth, suggestion of an eye, very clear, suggestion perhaps of a fin, and the tail quite clear there, one of these spiny tails. One can see why Picasso was so long employed in producing this. Literally months and months of work were put into it. One can begin to appreciate why that might have been. There's even this strange suggestion of it wearing a crown, perhaps. Picasso was very keen on associating himself with kingship. And here we have this interesting form of like a unicorn. One of the more resolved studies for Les Demoiselles. You can see the similarity with the figure coming in from the curtain, the seated figure here on the right. This figure here resolved later into the central figure, and then some others, perhaps this one being the leftmost figure with the hand on the curtain this side. The reason I included this in the slideshow is to show that Picasso was evidently thinking about fish, because right here in the middle we have another figure, looks like a female, holding a massive fish in her lap, and then possibly another one here. It's hard to say because it's not resolved, but it certainly might be another fish. there you have it, a clear indication that fish was something that was going on in his thought processes while he was deliberating the final version of Les Demoiselles. Associated with that, of course, are the other studies with sailors, maritime theme, and there's numerous other aspects of that which I haven't covered. A man in a little rowing boat, bent over, pulling up a line with something attached to it, which could be a fish, it might be something else. The gesture of the figure on the left would indicate that Picasso's driving at something. He's trying to suggest something. It's my belief that this is an associated Les Demoiselles work where he's attempting to provide us an indication of what he's been up to in this important painting. Fishing and secrecy, clues, mysteries were all part of his toolbox. He's functioning along a level of giving us a treasure hunt. So there you have this extraordinarily interesting drawing. I believe it was done in around 1909. My suspicion is that it's still very much on his mind, Les Demoiselles, and what he's achieved there. And he realizes that he's accomplished it so well, he really would like someone to figure out what he's been up to, but the best he can do, because of his preference for secrecy in the creative process, the best he can offer is to lay a trail of clues. And there are a number of these. They predate Les Demoiselles and they post-date Les Demoiselles almost to the time when he died. A fishing pole, or a fishing rod, as they're known in England, with a line going straight into the mouth of a fish, with an eye, could be here, could be here, the nose of the fish, big wide open mouth again, the body of the fish disappearing out of the frame of the painting, the coloration continuing where the body would perhaps re-enter if its body had the correct curvature on it, and the tail clearly marked here. A pretty clear image of a fish being caught on a line. Connoisseurs intently studying an image of a figure on an easel. The thing is, he's looking at it upside down. In connection with the title, Picasso's leaving us a very big clue in this little drawing. He had the tendency to do this, leave clues in his other work. Picasso didn't do things without reason, especially when it came to works of art. He put everything in that he could muster. What I'm suggesting is that this was something that was always on Picasso's mind, this use of upside down or lateral images. He knew all about it from an early age. Un sabio, somebody who knows. I think that explains rather a lot. Picasso did employ hidden, inverted and lateral images and other forms of concealed imagery in his art. It is a very frequent occurrence right through his career. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was informative. I hope some of that will influence the way you look at Les Demoiselles d'Avignon in the future. Well, thank you very much for watching. Okay, until later. Mendoza Ben Souzan.